Welcome to A Turn for the Better. I'm Dick Singh. This issue, we're going to put a handle on our tools. What do I mean by that? There's an array of commercial tools available. Most people pay no attention to them at all. They're just on the tool and they use them. Me, I change everything. And I'll go through how I change my handles and why. Mine's not the only way, but it really doesn't matter to me because I use my tools. These are all commercial tools. They all came with a tool in the handle. Bowl gouges, I don't remember quite what all of them were, but they were all handled tools. Is there any bad handles here? Probably not. They're all good handles. There's nothing wrong with them at all, other than I like to have my own type of handles. When it comes to these tools here, this one is just not to my comfortable suiting. This one I come very, very close to my style of handles. This one I have no feel with it whatsoever. These are fine, but let me show you what I have for tools. These are bowl gouges and spindle gouges. Now they're all basically the same handle, just in a different proportion. This one is actually a heavier tool, larger ferrule, longer length. One of my bowl turning gouges that, again, I like to keep the ferrule a little smaller, and I'll explain why. And my spindle gouges. We'll use the one that I use most of the time, my 3/8 spindle gouge. My 3/8 spindle gouge, probably I use that more than any other tool that I have. Now what makes this one so good to me? Number one, I like the tool to lay in the palm of my hand. I don't like holding a tool at its extreme end. I do like to get it up close and personal. When I do that, I also like to lay my finger down the flute of the tool, down the side of the tool, whatever I need for that particular operation. One of the other things that I like, that finger seems to wrap around that ball. My other finger is behind the ball, and it gives me very, very good control. And I think one of the things that is most important about a tool to me is the ability to feel the tool in the operation. In other words, I can actually feel that tool cutting. The length of the handle, I like it to be where it kind of balances the tool. Also, it lays underneath my arm when I'm in a one arm or one hand cutting position. It also lays up against me if possible to help dampen vibration. And one of the other things, I do like a good looking handle. Okay, now as you can see, I have 3 different sizes in proportional. I'm going to be making the smaller one because that will be in the relationship of the tool size. This is a 1/4 inch square round nose scraper. I buy them unhandled. This particular one is a Henry Taylor tool, bought at Craft Supplies out of Provo, Utah. For the material for the handle, probably traditionally ash is used more than any other. Beech, sometimes maple. Mine, I like bird's eye maple. Just one of my little quirks, I think it's pretty. Ferrules. I buy brass thin wall tubing, lengths approximately 6 feet. You can buy it at industrial supply places such as McMaster Carr. Numerous ones handle it. Why brass? I like brass. It has more strength than the normal copper tubing, the water pipe that some folks use. I think the copper looks kind of tacky and it really doesn't have the strength that brass does. When I do buy my tube lengths, I just take and put it in my chuck and actually true the end up, saw it off, turn it around, true the other end up, and I've got some of the best bushing or ferrule material that I think you can have. If you don't need 6 feet of it, I'm sure somebody in your club would love to have part of it along with you. My blank is roughly 1.5 inches square and 11 inches long, strictly to suit the size of the handle that I'm turning. I put it in my 4-jaw chuck and used my live center just to line things up. We're going to go ahead and rough this down. One of the things that I see a lot of turners do that I disagree with is they turn their handle first, then drill the hole size. When you drill a hole in a piece of wood, the drill will go in the direction of least resistance, which means it's going to follow the grain. So if you want a tool with, or a handle with the tool coming out at an oblique angle, go right ahead, be my guest. But I prefer to take and drill my hole, then turn my handle concentric to the hole. While we're talking about drilling the holes, a round handle is no problem. You just measure it and use the appropriate size drill and drill it. Now that we're talking about putting in a square tool into a round hole, we have a different situation. Being the flats are 1/4 inch, but we're still going to need to come corner to corner, which is going to give us approximately 350 thousandths, or 100 thousandths larger hole. But you want something to hold these corners tight. So let's compromise and use a 5/16 drill, which will take and give us probably 20-25 thousandths on each corner to hold the tool. Occasionally you're going to run into a tool with a tang, and the tangs are normally tapered. What I like to do is find out the depth of my hole. Say for the bottom inch, I could drill, say, a 3/16 hole, which would hold the bottom end. Come up to the top, I could put in a 1/4 inch hole, which would make a stepped hole, holding the bottom at the inside or the bottom of the handle and at the top. One of the things I also like to do is break the edges of that a little bit just to make it easier to slip into the holes. The first step in drilling this hole, we want to determine how deep we want our tool to go in. I don't want to go too shallow with it, because then this tool is going to have a tendency to vibrate if I have to do any reaching with it. Okay, the drill I'm going to be using is either a bullet point or a pilot drill. They have flat flutes. They have that little guiding pilot, which I consider one of the better drilling drills around. In other words, it takes and drills a straight hole, the best of any that I've had my hands on. I put my drill in the chuck. I have yet to see any wood lathe that did not have a certain amount of play in a tailstock. If we lock this over in its most out of line position, we're going to drill an oversized hole. So what I like to do is leave the lathe or the tailstock loose, advance the drill up. Now it has found its center. Now I'll lock it down. Now I can drill. By doing this, you have given the drill the best opportunity to go straight. Once it's entered the hole, you have no choice. I'm using a 60-degree center on my live center, and we're going to put that in the hole, and that's going to make it concentric to it. Again, I'm starting the lathe. Tailstock is loose. I'm going to bring it in till it locates itself centerline wise. Now I'll lock it down, adjust my tension, and we're ready to turn. I'm just kind of roughing it out so I have an idea of what my shape is really going to look like. Okay, we're to the point that we're going to need to start fitting our ferrule. I'm going to use a 9/16 ferrule on this particular one, and probably my only reason is I like to leave a roughly 1/8 of an inch of material between a ferrule and a tool. The larger tools I go a little bit larger, maybe 5/32 to 3/16. I like to keep them basically small because I wrap my hand around them, but I don't want to get them so thin that when we drive the tool in, we split the handle. I'm just taking light cuts because I want this to be a drive fit for my ferrule. We'll just start it on. Use a block of wood. And there's our ferrule. My next step is going to be to lay out my handle. If you're going to do a lot of them, you may want to take and make a blueprint, such as the largest diameter back from, say, the ferrule, the smallest diameter from the ferrule, the largest diameter again from the ferrule, and the end of the tool. Okay, this one I'm just going to eyeball it. First time I've done it, and we have it laid out. Taking a caliper and checking my diameter at the largest on the forward end, and I'm giving it a little play because we are going to be turning it and sanding it. We've set the diameter at the back of the tool, and we'll do the same at the center. The tool I'm going to use right now is a roughing gouge just to get rid of some of the bulk of the material. Now that the bulk of the material is gone, I'm laying my other tool handle up against it and looking through to see that the curves are pretty much the same. Now I'm going to take and work this end down to my ferrule first. Blending this ferrule to the handle, I'm going to use a shear cut. Stand it right up at its side, 45 degrees, and just blend that in. Now that I've got the match from the ferrule to the handle, I'm going to go in with my skew and start removing some of the base or the bulk of the material in here. Now I do want to work from the tailstock end back towards the headstock as much as we can. It's time to check one more time. Looks like it's a little heavy right in here. Other than that, it looks pretty decent. I've now done most of my finish turning, or what I feel, but the real test lays in my hand quite nice. Now this doesn't mean that whatever size I've got will work for you. Make that to where that handle feels good to you. You're the one that's going to be holding it. You're the one that has to feel the tool through the handle. I think we're ready to sand. I've sanded it in the lathe running down to 400 grit, and I'd now like to just sand the length of the tool. I contend you cannot get all the sanding marks out with the grain or with the lathe running. I'm going to be putting the decoration in now. Just centered my tool, and mark off one of the, I guess you would call them etchings or lines. To make these decorative insights cuts, I'm using a little 1/4-inch square tool bit made into a scraping tool. Now, the one thing you have to do is remember this can catch or tear the surface. So I'm going to actually go into kind of a down pattern or down position to cut that. The next step, I'm going to take and break the edge on that ferrule so it does not cut us. Just taking a gouge and kind of shear cutting the end over. Our last job in the lathe is cutting this free. I'm just going to remove some of my excess wood right now. The last step is going to be parting it off from the lathe, and I'm going to use the long point of my skew. When you part this off, it is just like using an axe. You have to make room for the tool to work. So cut from one side and then the other. We've got our handle. One of the things I have done, and I suggest everyone do, I've broke the corners on this tool. All the tools, when they first are made or received, they're very sharp. They have a tendency to dent your tool rest, or sometimes even worse, your finger. We're going to position it where we like our grain the best. I'm going to put it in a vise. After I've finished sanding off the end where we cut it free, taken a little masking tape and just taped off the tool so I don't get it dirty. I'm going to put a little bit of stain on this. I think it kind of enhances the bird's eyes, and we'll let it absorb as much as it will. I've taken and given the handle a couple coats of spray Deft. I prefer a smooth handle. A lot of people contend that they should be rough. Personal opinion, do what you like. Anyway, that's our handle for today, but that doesn't mean that you have to stop there. There are times when you have to make a handle that's a little different than normal. This particular one I use for boring, and if I had the long handle, it would be completely out of scope for me because I have to be down looking how it's going to go. Sometimes you need a handle that just fits right for like hollowing, or even such a thing as a pin vise for drilling small holes. I hope you enjoyed this issue. I've always enjoyed my tool handles, and I hope that it has helped you get a handle on your tool problems.